Good evening, folks, and welcome back to day number 22 of the Bible in 365. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Exodus chapter 14, beginning in verse 21, and exploring all the way until Exodus chapter 17, ending in verse 16. All right, folks, let's get started. So our story continues today in Exodus chapter 14, verse 21. Here we see that Moses and the Israelites cross the Red Sea. Moses follows the Lord's command to raise his staff and to stretch it out over the water, and the sea divides and the Israelites cross on dry land. Now there's a wall of water to their left and a wall of water to their right. And at this point in time, God hardens Pharaoh's heart, and Pharaoh pursues the Israelites into the sea. Now, the angel of the Lord plagues the Egyptians with some transportation issues with their chariots, and this buys the Israelites more time to cross. After crossing, the Lord instructs Moses to close up the sea, and the Egyptian army is swept away and drowned. Ultimately, this act of God's provision increases the faith of the Israelites in the Lord. Now in chapter 15, we see that the Israelites throw a victory party and they sing songs of triumph unto the Lord. These lyrics of these songs recount the character of the Lord and of the provision and victory that he brought to them. So the songs act as a token of remembrance, similar to what we were talking about yesterday. Now, not much time has passed and the Israelites are complaining again. They want water. The Lord provides a solution. Now, chapter 15 ends with a warning of instruction to the Israelites to obey the commands of the Lord in order to avoid them from facing the deadly diseases that plagued the Egyptians. In chapter 16, we see that the gratefulness of the Israelites returns to bitterness and critique as they compare their current situation to their lives in Egypt, which they now romanticize and want back. So the Lord provides for the people quail in the evening and manna in the morning for them to eat. He also gives them specific instructions on how much they could collect. Ultimately, it was only to collect enough for each and every day so that their trust and dependency remained upon the Lord. Here it's important to note that the Lord also instructs Moses to gather and preserve some manna to serve as a reminder unto future generations the provision of God. Now, the Israelites ate this manna for about 40 years. So we ultimately know that's going to be when they are wandering in the desert, but the story hasn't told us that quite yet. We just know that they are going to eat of this manna for 40 years. We also do know that this manna tastes like honey. So every time they eat it, it is a reminder of the promised land, the land flowing in milk and honey. In chapter 17, the complaints return yet again. This time, the Israelites are thirsty for water. They say they're going to die, and so they blame God. Isn't this how we all are, folks, right? We get upset, we get angry, all of a sudden we forget everything that God has done on our behalf, and so we start complaining again and blaming God until he shows up and provides for us once again. We're always constantly having to be reminded of the provision of the Lord. So this time, Moses strikes a rock there near Horeb where they are, and water gushes out, and it's enough for the people to drink. Now, chapter 17 also states that at this point in time, the Israelites are attacked by the Amalekites or by Amalek's army. And interestingly enough, there's a correspondence between Moses raising his hands during the battle and him lowering his hands. Whenever his hands are raised, the Israelites are winning. Whenever his hands are lowered, they are losing the battle. And so they see this connection, and so Aaron and Hur, two men of God, go and they set Moses down on a rock because he's tired, and they hold his hands up until the sun sets in order that the Israelites could win the battle. And so Joshua and his army won the battle. So at this point in time, the Lord instructs Moses to write these events onto a scroll in order that they will remember, since the Lord was going to completely wipe out Amalek from existence. So in today's reading, we see a lot of similarities to yesterday in terms of this idea of remembering what the Lord has done. Moses and the Israelites sing songs, and the lyrics were to help them remember the provision of the Lord. Moses was called to gather and collect the manna to serve as a remembrance, a token of remembrance for future generations. And then they were supposed to write down the events that occurred, because without writing it down, no one would have ever heard of the Amalekites, because they were wiped out from existence. And so God, the Lord, is telling Moses, do these things to remember how I have provided for you and the Israelites. All right, folks, it is here at the end of chapter 17 that we end our reading for tonight. Tomorrow, our story is going to pick up in Exodus chapter 18, beginning in verse 1, and we are going to read all the way until Exodus chapter 21, ending in verse 21. Well, folks, as always, good evening and God bless.